best business practices and why it's a good trading partner for the nation of Japan. Clip 1.
Florida is the fastest growing state in the United States. We have people migrating from other states into Florida. Our economy is over $1.2 trillion, which would be 13th in the world if we were our own country. So there's a lot of economic opportunities, and we know that Japan has some of the best companies that have ever existed in business.
So Governor Ron DeSantis in Japan, talking about Florida. He's actually possibly meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel later this week. That's according to a Politico article. So that's a big story there, big step for somebody who admitted in Japan, I'm not an official candidate for president yet, but we'll see. He sure is acting like one.
Well, Steve, I didn't realize Florida's economy was that large. 13th. I mean, it was big, but 13th. If it was a country, it would be 13th in the world, and and
that probably trails California. Just to, as far as sheer size,
maybe
Texas.
Maybe Texas. I don't know. But this is for both of you guys. Either one of you can jump in here. This is fairly typical behavior by someone who is running for president. Now, technically, Ron DeSantis hasn't announced yet. Our understanding is that he will announce when the legislative session is over in Florida. By the way, do either of you know Ron DeSantis, the legislature has to give a kind of a temporary permission, doesn't it, for the governor to run for president and not focus on his duties as governor?
We got into that last week on the show, so we have discussed that before. I've not looked it up to confirm that, but states do things differently, so it is very possible, perhaps even likely, that Florida does have to grant its governor permission to do something like that. Governor who would presumably step up and assume command should Governor DeSantis have.
着替え終わってジムで待ち合わせするとき、飲み物を持ってかないと喉乾くから、その飲み物を持って一緒にジムで待ち合わせしたときに着替え終わったら飲み物を持ってきてくれってこと。持ってきてくれって誰が言ってる？だからエクササイズするときに喉が渇くでしょ。だからそれで一緒に忘れずに持ってきてくれって誰も言ってないよ。でもそれ私に水あるかって聞いたから、車の中にあるって聞いたから、だからあれは手で自分で持ってこなきゃいけないから言ってるわけ。
You're not known, you haven't had foreign policy experience, so you've got to try to make that case by saying, hey, I've been places.
One thing he does have on his resume is time served as a congressman for the state of Florida. So he has done some sort of international work, sort of, as a representative of Florida there beyond his time as governor. He was represented a few times to represent his home district as a congressman. Because you mentioned Trump here, former President Trump, who is already an official candidate for president again come 2024, he's not willing to let Ron DeSantis get some of the attention out there. And so Trump has done his best to campaign against him and Joe Biden and other people, assuming they do run officially in 2024. I've got some audio here of Donald Trump, and it's things that we've heard before, but he's saying, look, I made DeSantis. And I can mention some other things that Trump is quoted as saying as well. But let's hear what Trump has to say about his potential rival or the Republican nomination. Clip 2.
In Florida, I got 1.2 million more votes than your successful governor's campaign. You know that. We got 1.2 million. Sir, I'd love to have your support, sir. I'd love to have your support. I'm down at about 3. I'd love to have your support. All right, let's think about it. And it was like a rocket ship after I gave it. Otherwise, right now, you'd have a lawyer someplace looking for business. If that.
What's interesting there is that joke at the very end, in my opinion, kind of fell flat. It didn't. It was like the, but nonetheless, Trump is doing his best to try to tell people, hey, ahead of time, don't believe everything you hear from Ron, or de sanctimonious, as President Trump likes to
call it. And Steve. If you're the former president, you have already been overseas many times, negotiated treaties, the Abraham Accords in the Middle East, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, all those kinds of things. So I can see where the governor, Ron DeSantis, would want to try to bolster his resume, but Trump, obviously, as a former president, is going to have a laundry list of accomplishments when it comes to foreign policy.
Yeah, but that's not the only laundry list he's going to have. And the old adage, "It's the economy, stupid," is still going to trump most of most of other issues. So the Florida economy, as we have been saying, is doing really good. And for some reason, Donald Trump seems to be really fixated on. I mean, he does. He has a list of things he could run on as qualifications and things, without even mentioning Ron DeSantis. But he seems a little bit taken with Ron DeSantis. Just to circle back to what we were talking about before, currently, at least as of March 31st, which is the article I pulled up, Florida law says any officer who qualifies for federal public office must resign from the office he or she presently holds if the terms or any part thereof run concurrently with each other. The resignation is irrevocable, so they can't lose and then come back. Now, that bill, the legislature is trying to change that. The bill went to committee on April 4th. I don't know where it's at, unless you have an update there, Chris.
I don't, but I have shared a link to something what you're talking about there. We say, to Ed's point about the Florida legislature having to do things to allow a governor to run for POTUS, and we shared a link there to WESH there in the great state of Florida.
So all that, if the legislative session ends sometime in May, which is what we've been hearing all along, that's when DeSantis will announce that he's running for president. Then this special pass, if you would, this special dispensation for the current sitting governor would have to be passed by then.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's where it lies. I mean, if let's say the legislature can't get that done, let me start with you, Chris, and then go to you, Steve. If the legislature can't get that done in time, and the current law is that the Governor Ron DeSantis, would have to step down. He'd have to resign, basically, as governor, and it would be irreversible. Do you think he still runs? I'll start with you, Chris.
I would say yes, because why have you been touring the world to talk up your policies, things that you have accomplished during your time as governor? And why would you be traveling to places like Japan and Israel to talk with people? So I would say yes. It's probably not a matter of if, but when he announces.
What do you think, Steve?
I have a hard time believing that he doesn't have a good enough finger on the pulse of his legislature, if not the ability to sway his legislature, that there's not really much of a doubt in his mind of whether it's going to happen or not. So I have a feeling it's going to.
No, I think Governor DeSantis thinks it's his moment. When was he? He was elected first in 2018.
2018, and then he was just
reelected in 2022.
Correct.
4 years. That means, because you're locked now. I mean, he can't run for governor again.
It'd be 2028 before he could run, should he want to run
for president. So he would be out of office as governor for 2 years. What I'm saying is, reelected in 2022, 4-year term goes to 2026. If he were to decide, I think I'll wait for the next presidential race.
Yeah.
That would be 2028. He'd be out as governor in 2026. I don't know if he would want to wait 2 years. You're not really doing anything. You're not in the public eye. Anyway, I think both of your points are well taken. Yeah. I think he is making these trips overseas because he is running. And to your point, Steve, I think he probably has a good idea of whether or not he'll get that permission from the legislature.
Well, there is some sort of precedent now, if you can call it that, for somebody launching a campaign well in advance. Donald Trump announced in 2022, hey, I'm going to run for president in 2024. Well, so it wouldn't be the first time somebody gets 2 years.
That's true, but he has worldwide name recognition. And that's...
He's huge.
Yes.
I would, if he waits, whether he waits or not, I'm going to say right now, put my marker down, that under any circumstance, Ron DeSantis will be running for president in 2028.
Oh,
I say that
either
because,
way.
well, if he loses this primary, he'll be back. If he wins his primary, loses the election, he'll be back. And if he's a sitting president, of course, he'll be back. So,
yeah. All right. Well, we'll wait and see. We do know there are 3 certain Republicans running. Tim Scott has an exploratory committee. Okay, and so we'll wait to see if there's a 4th here in May. Now, on the Democratic side, there is, of course, we don't know about Biden. He's said that he would if his health allows, so on and so forth. There's Marianne Williamson, and then somebody last week,
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yes, RFK Jr. That was an absolute. That wasn't exploratory.
No,
that's an announcement.
I'm really doing this, kind of following in the steps of his uncle Teddy, who tried to primary a sitting president in 1980 and didn't succeed at that.
Jimmy Carter.
Yeah. Talking about sticking with Democrats for a second, President Biden is expected to announce his re-election bid tomorrow. But here's where it gets interesting, Ed. It's going to be a pre-taped video remark. He's not going to do something live in Scranton or at his home state of Delaware. He's going to have a pre-taped remark, possibly in the White House basement, to announce that he's going to run again, so that way they can tell him what to say and how to say it. And I'm sure it's going to have a lot of emotion to it.
But before you go on that, that's actually kind of smart. I mean, if you're running the Biden ship. Okay, first of all, you're trying to get off that coral reef that he's stuck on, all right? You do not want him making a live announcement and then flubbing it.
That's true.
Because then his announcement that he's running will remind people of the concerns that they currently have. So just in terms of shrewdness,
yeah,
they're probably doing
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I've said it before on the show. It won't be the last time I say it. Democrats run to win, and so they find ways to make it work so that way they can avoid disaster. But speaking of disaster, many people, it turns out, don't want Joe Biden to run for president again. I have an Associated Press poll that came out Friday, and only 47% of Democrats 47% of Democrats think Biden should run again in 2024. Overall, just 26% of Americans want Biden to run. So this guy may face a bigger uphill battle than some of the people running for presidents that are not already in office.
And Steve, if I'm not mistaken, that same poll showed that, if it wasn't the same poll, it came out last week as well, that's like 74% of people think the country's headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah,
right? That's a large chunk of people, and as Tim has said numerous times on the air, it is unfortunate that, or just the way it is, that sitting presidents get too much credit when things are going well and too much blame when things are going poorly. That's generally true. I would say in the case of this specific president, President Biden, it seems to me pretty clear that he is responsible, more than maybe anybody I can remember in recent memory, more responsible for the horrible economy we have, a lot of the just detrimental, devastating policies he's tried to institute that could do serious long-term damage to our energy sector, for example. But 74%, that's a pretty big chunk of people.
Again, it's the economy stupid, and I guess that all depends on whether you think he's actually calling those shots, whether he's responsible or not.
True.
But there's a lot of negative indicators in the economy and the foreign policy and any number of different measurements. And folks out there, I got to tell you, pay attention, because if you're only having one news source, unless it's AFN, then
American
you're probably American Family News. Then you're probably not getting the whole story, because the mainstream media kind of hides a little bit of the deficit that Joe Biden has right now.
All right. Well, since you mentioned American Family News,
yes,
do a little pitch to our listeners, because we want to encourage them to get signed up for American Family News.
Absolutely. American Family News, AFN.net. And there you can sign up for a daily newsletter. It'll only come once a day. It'll have our top headlines, and we will not shop your name around to anybody else. It's ours alone. And also you can take part. This is kind of fun. You can take part in polls. We put a poll up pretty much every day of what our listeners think or readers think about certain issues, and they can do that. So we really do try to cover the gamut of news, and we do it from a biblical perspective. So it's a great place to go to get that point of view. It's an incredible journalist working.
And when they click through, they get that email with the list of top stories. If you click through and you go to the AFN site, there are all sorts of other videos and other stories that you can kind of browse around.
We have AP headlines. We have videos, I think, from the Associated Press as well, that you can watch. They cover. We will put up things there that cover anything from policies that we're interested in. We had a whole lot of stuff about the train derailments a while back. So it's all news that's fit to read that we think is important.
All right, good. Thank you for that. All right, Chris.
Speaking of the mainstream media, it's no secret that they often do PR work for the Democratic Party.
You think?
Yeah, someone just said, no, really? But here, I'm going to set this up. Somebody that's saying as much is Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican from South Carolina. He was on CNN over the weekend to talk about abortion and Roe v. Wade, things like that with CNN's Dana Bash. And she tried to correct him at one point, to which he said, stop covering for Democrats. Clip 4.
Only North Korea and China allow abortion on demand up to the moment of birth, except the Democratic Party. What the Democratic Party proposes on abortion is barbaric. Abortion up to the moment of birth, taxpayer funded, I think is barbaric. I welcome this debate. I think the Republican Party will be in good standing to oppose late-term abortion like most of the civilized world.
Just for the record, Roe went up to viability, but I just want to button this up.
No, quit covering for these guys. No. Your media, you keep covering for these guys. They introduced legislation that allowed abortion on demand with taxpayer funded. You paying for it, the taxpayer up to the moment of birth. That was their position in Washington. That's the law they want to pass, and nobody in your business will talk about it.
I don't know about you guys, but his last day on CNN was glorious, wasn't it?
And he's absolutely true in his presentation of the fact of the matter. And Dana Bash. She did try to cover, Steve, for the Democrats by pointing to what Roe versus Wade had said. But the Democrats have long supported abortion rights up to the moment of birth. Many of them included partial birth abortion in their position.
Yeah, and their bills could be construed to say even after live birth.
Infanticide.
Yeah. It's true. She's got a point that the media will not report it correctly. So let me ask you guys: is abortion a winning message for Republicans going into 2024?
That's a great question. My perspective is twofold. First of all, it is always the right thing to do to stand up for the unborn. Okay, always right in God's eyes to stand up for the unborn. But that's not what you asked. Okay, what you asked is it a winning message? And I think that the country, in large portions of it, especially blue states, the country is unsure of its own position. I don't think most Americans like partial birth abortion, certainly don't like infanticide. They also want exceptions for rape, incest, the life of the mother. And also, I think, and then Chris, I'll turn it over to you, I think in blue states and blue cities, it is an issue that will drive progressives, especially young people, to the polls. So I'm not sure it's a winning issue in terms of the politics of it, but it's always right to defend the unborn in God's eyes. And Lindsey Graham and others have to. I mean, they have to go. And Ron DeSantis, governor, former President Trump, kept his promises to put pro-life justices on the Supreme Court. and throughout the federal judiciary. So I think this will be a divider when it comes to voting, especially if the voting public believes the Republicans are going to continue to push on abortion. But this is kind of what we asked for. We asked for state-by-state battles, and that's where it's headed.
It is a winning issue, but I would say that Republicans need to be better communicators about this and other issues. The reason I say that is because going into the 2022 midterms, it looked like it was